We listen to my dad's music because my mother doesn't like music. So we listen to big band, swing, Frank Sinatra, Bing, Louis, Ella, that sort of stuff. And also on the periphery was my sister 70s top 40 music. So I had that sort of a little bit of this, I don't know, 70s glam rock and Captain and Janelle, and then my dad's music. So yeah, that was me. That's what I grew up with.
Yeah, so I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, and my family, there was an easy listening station called 4KQ, so we would always have that on in the car, and it was basically back then it was 60s, 70s, 80s. Now these days in the 2000s, it's like all the way up to the early 2000s. Is considered easy listening now. So I that's how I got my love of things like the Beatles and David Bowie. My mum was obsessed with Elvis. There were always Elvis pictures up on the wall. She loved watching his movies. We would always get my mum something Elvis related for Christmas or birthdays, that sort of occasions. And my dad was big into Suzy Q. And he, for some reason, is quite strange. He was into Rocky Horror Picture Show. And so I spent my childhood hating Rocky Horror Picture Show because my dad loved it. And then it wasn't until I got into high school and I met my friends and they were into Rocky Horror Picture Show. They were like, I allowed myself to go, actually, this is pretty good. And then I got into Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it was because my dad was into it, basically. And I was like, well, I don't think so. Probably the closest affinity I had to the music of my dad was he was into Queen, and you can't deny that Queen is an amazing band. So, okay, we both like Queen then.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and we're also kind of doing a Next Stop Everywhere episode today because I have two Doctor Who podcasters joining me, and in a very timey-wimey way, I believe it is your Sunday morning as we're just speaking.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we're in the future here. So.
Yes, you guys are in the future. Yes.
Yes, Jesse, and it's all good. It's all good.
Everything gets sorted overnight.
No COVID. Went away last night.
Everyone is vaccinated now. There is just everything's back to normal. Oh, that's good to hear. That's wonderful.
It's fantastic. I mean, you wouldn't know how surprised we were when we woke up. It was all gone and they were handing out ice creams for everyone. It's just heaven here.
I love that. So I have Adam and Nick joining me. We connected there is multiple Facebook groups out there about find a guest, be a guest. And I am always active on that, looking, because I love talking to other podcasters. And I love hearing what other people are passionate about. And since my other podcast is a Doctor Who podcast, it seemed like a perfect fit. So Adam, Nick, thank you so much for joining me. Let's start out with—
Thank you for inviting us.
Hey, I'm thrilled. Let's start with you. Maybe you guys do this together, maybe separately, but give me your elevator pitch. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to have you talk about the podcast.
Start.
Yeah, sure. D4WH is our Doctor Who podcast, and basically we look at episodes of Doctor Who, and we both connected over our love of Doctor Who, and we're both comedians as well, and both into comedy. So we take a very funny look at Doctor Who episodes. So we both love Doctor Who, but we also know that especially some of the classic episodes where it looks like they've taken everything out of the BBC closet and chucked it in, so we like to laugh at Doctor Who as well. So
That's good.
Yes, although I grew up on Doctor Who, classic Who. So, when everyone says, oh, and the sets wobbled, I didn't notice as a kid. I do now, but I didn't then, I would have to say. But yeah, so sometimes Adam will laugh at something and I'll go, that was a great episode, damn you.
Yeah, and I grew up on the new Doctor Who since 2005. So my version of set wobbling is bad CGI from the early 2000s.
Yes. Just to give you a little background, I discovered Who through Torchwood. There was a Firefly fan podcast, and someone wrote in a letter saying that Malcolm Reynolds was the same character as Captain Jack. That because Jack could never die, therefore he had become Malcolm Reynolds in this new life, and they both had long coats, and they both had this, smart aleck being. And so one of my best friends was a huge Doctor Who fan, and I said, "Hey, what's this Torchwood show? And who's Captain Jack?" So he just lent me the first season of Torchwood. And, I watched it and I really loved it. And so I went back to him and I said, I really like Captain Jack. What episodes of the Doctor, of Doctor Who does Jack guest star on? And so he just handed me Eccleston's first season and says, it's just easier to give you the whole season. Just because you aren't going to understand if you just pick up the few episodes. So I started watching it and really fell in love with it. And then moved on to, Tenet, and then I saved up all the specials on the DVR, so that I could watch them in order. And so Matt Smith was the first Doctor where I was watching as they came out, in one episode.
Very cool.
And do you like Matt Smith? He's my favorite of the
Tenet is my Doctor, and I was going to ask you guys who's your Doctor. Tenet is my favorite Doctor, though I loved Matt Smith. And then my buddy, about 6 years ago, the guy who runs our network reached out to me, and I was doing a Castle podcast at the time with Nathan Fillion, because I'm a big Nathan Fillion and Firefly fan. And I was also doing a Farscape podcast where I had never seen Farscape. So I was watching Farscape as a newbie and joining a couple of people that were vets. And
that's the Australian one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And
so I did some work recently, just some actual consulting work with the girl who played the villain, Rebecca Riggs.
I want to hear about that.
She's so lovely. And then she told me, and I didn't recognize it because of the makeup and stuff, so I went back and rewatched it, and she was just saying she can't believe that people still love it.
Oh, they do.
It's amazing.
So my buddy, Rob said we have a kids where he and his wife and his daughter did Cuckoo for Who. So they did an episode of every new Doctor Who episode. He says, but we want a more adult themed, not as in R or X rated, but a grown-up perspective. He said, would you be willing to do the Doctor Who podcast? And so I reached out to another friend of mine, Charles Skaggs, who had been a Doctor Who fan for years and had always been saying, Jesse, you need to watch this show. Jesse, you need to watch this show. Jesse, you need to watch this show. And so I said, hey, Charles, do you want to do a Doctor Who podcast with me? And he said, yes. Now, how do we do a podcast? And I said, it's easy. Go buy a headset, download Skype, and we'll figure out the rest. And so that's, been 7 years later. And what we do is we, anytime it's new, we cover every new episode, as it comes out. And then Charles, when it's off season, he has a list of all the classic Who's and all the new Who's, because we didn't really start till like the Capaldi era was when we first started recording. And so we go back and forth between old classic Who or modern Who, and we talk about a new episode. So I do know exactly what you guys are talking about, that at times classic Who could be interesting, and and there is a drinking game that if we watch a classic Who, I am going to bring up pacing, because at times there are, and in fact, you're going to have me guest star on y'all's podcast, and I will bring up pacing when we talk about the Pyramids of Mars.
And that's Adam's too, because how much filler did they need?
Yeah, my two things are padding and dodgy cliffhangers, where they've kind of had to shoehorn a cliffhanger in because it's the end of the episode and they need something exciting to bring you back. And then the next episode is like, oh, don't worry about that cliffhanger, it's totally fine.
We will definitely talk more about that. All right, so let's move on. Well, before we get to that, I do need to know, what are y'all speculation about the new showrunner and like a new doctor? Give me your thoughts, and we'll start with you, Nick. I mean, what are you hoping for?
I'm probably hoping for somebody a bit more goofy, although not that Jodie's not, but a bit more Matt Smith goofy or Tom Baker. They're my two doctors. But I'm also looking, keep the comedy in it or keep the irreverent stuff, but a bit more of the horror that I loved when I was watching Tom Baker as a kid. I loved the horror of Pyramid of Mars. Just a little bit more of that would be nice, but just don't give us something that's 40 minutes of setup and 5 minutes of finishing it. So, and maybe a bit more hard science fiction, just for a change.
Yeah. Do you have a preference on the new doctor? Are you wanting male, female, or are you concerned about age, race, or anything at all? Do you have any thoughts?
No, nothing on that. I don't think, I think I love Peter Capaldi, but I think he looked a bit too old for the role. I think you need someone a bit younger to keep the kids in. Male, female doesn't bother me. I will say, before Jodie was made the doctor, I was nervous about a female doctor because I'd been watching Doctor Who since I was about 5 years old, and it was always a man in my mind. But the minute they announced it, I went, oh yeah, no, that'll be fine. And I've really liked her. I think she's been let down by some stories, but I really like her, and I will be sad to see her go. So male, female, and not someone really well known, because I think it takes away from them.
Yeah, and I do think that's important. For the doctor should be not necessarily someone so that they can grow into the role. Adam, how about you? Thoughts?
I don't have any preference for whoever plays the doctor, but like Nicchia said, I prefer someone who's not well known. Although having said that, Peter Capaldi had a whole career before playing the doctor, and he was fantastic. But the thing I would really like is, I think it'd be good if they got a female showrunner in, because I mean the show's been on for almost 60 years, and it's interesting that it's always been if you talk about the role of showrunner. If you talk about the role of producer, obviously the first producer was a woman, Verity Lambert. But I think a female showrunner also shows that because Doctor Who has quite a big female fan base as well. So it'd be good to showcase that and just see what they bring to the show. I don't have any real preference as to the stories. So I'm kind of the opinion I'll just go with whatever they come up with. And if I don't like what's going on, I'll just wait for next week. Someone once said that the TARDIS is less a time machine and more of a genre machine, where basically every single episode could be, one week it's horror, next week it's sci-fi, next week it's human drama, then it's a romance, So that's the good thing, is you can have different styles and different stories within the same season. So
I find with Doctor Who, even if I hate 3 episodes in a row. I would never go, well, that's it, I'm never watching it again. It will always be a part of my life because we had a love affair from a very young age. So, but yeah, a female showrunner would be interesting because that would change the tone of the stories, I think.
I reckon a good choice would be Joy Wilkinson. She wrote The Witchfinders, which was one of my favorite episodes from series 11. She's written some short stories and novels for the series, so we know that she's into the show. I think she might be a bit busy. I think she's doing quite a few different things, but I think she would be really good. That's the person who comes to the top of my head.
I'll ring the BBC, let them know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I am a huge Babylon 5 fan, and so when I saw on Twitter that J. Michael Straczynski had kind of thrown his hat into the ring. And even though, immediately fans said, well, you're not British. And he said, I would not have put my hat in this ring if I had not been ready to go through the gauntlet. I think it's a very, very long shot that BBC will hire someone like J. Michael Straczynski, though my personal wish is they would, because one, I think he's shown he knows how to write a story, not only Babylon 5, but since 8, Jeremiah, he has written, his comic books and his novels have been great. He also has shown that he can bring a show in budget. He can do that. I think also.
Is he a fan, Jesse?
He is a major fan. And
he's got the job then.
And I also think that he would bring the same way Jody brought in a new audience. I think JMS would bring in an audience because they're like one of the guys who was part of our network, Phil Parrish, had said he's never watched Doctor Who. But if J. Michael Straczynski was the showrunner, he would turn it on to see because of him. So I think you would get an influx of new listeners or viewers. I think that's good.
I think so. He might, Jesse, get a bit sick of the BBC and their tight-fisted ways.
Right. Well, and he worked with Warner Brothers, and when Crusade was on TNT, he fought that battle. So I think he's aware of that. I agree with you. I want a good actor to be the Doctor. Yeah. I would not mind if it was a person of color. Either male or female. I think that would be an interesting choice. Just I would worry if you go back to another white guy, just that there would be too much of, a female doctor. If they're not a white guy, they don't work. So that's the other thing. But I agree. I'm going to be you guys. Whoever is the Doctor, I'm going to follow along. I really loved Capaldi. I think he really brought some interesting things to the row. And I have loved Jodie. I do think that I agree with you, some of the storylines have not served her well. But when we look at like the Rosa Parks episode is as good as anything. It's
totally
amazing. Yeah. So I think that would be really interesting.
Spyfall still one of my favorites.
The Demons of the Punjab was great. Fugitive of the Jadoon is probably my favorite Jodie Whittaker episode so far. Like it's I
just love her. She's quirky and she's like a little kid, like Matt Smith was. I love it.
Yeah, she does have a little bit of that. And I get very angry, the way fans get angry when I hear someone, well, I just don't see her. And I'm like, are you not looking at her performance? I mean, you can see a little bit of Matt Smith. You can see a little bit of Tom Baker. You can see that she's not copying previous Doctors, but she is doing that. You can see them through her the same way that Matt Smith loved Patrick Troughton and did a lot of,
you can tell, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. And I think, Jesse, that there are some people who it will probably take a decade or longer to have a few more females to finally go, oh yeah, okay. I think it's just that she's a girl. That's it.
I think so.
Yeah, and I also think, with the show that's been on for almost 60 years, it has this unique opportunity to reinvent itself every, 4 or 5 years. And Chris Chibnall, not always the greatest writer, we'll say that, but who is basically, even Matt Smith, Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies had their off days.
Exactly.
But he was trying to do something different with the show, get new viewers into a show that's been around for 60 years. Because you can't keep relying on people who've been watching it since the 70s, because eventually you need to try something different, get younger people in. So I think he's done pretty well with what he's
when we were playing Doctor Who when I was in primary school, it just never occurred to me that I could be the doctor. I always had to be the assistant. I would love it now at that age. I would be the doctor and they would be my assistants. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that you can't oversell the importance of that there
I don't think you can.
Yeah, that there are young women out there that have that empowerment of like, I can be the doctor now.
I felt empowered as an old woman.
Absolutely. Adam, you didn't, who's your doctor?
Oh, my doctor is Tennant. Yeah. So I started watching, basically, I was dating a girl who was into Doctor Who around 2005. So I got in at the tail end of Eccleston. But I always considered David Tennant as the doctor who got me into Doctor Who. I just loved, there was that initial, it was quite interesting because I wasn't even a real Whovian, but that first Tennant episode, I was like, no, I don't know, this is the other guy. And then within a few episodes, I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally on board. And it's because of Tenet that I, such a huge fan, still watching today and doing a podcast about it. So yeah, I consider Tenet my fan.
They say as a Doctor Who fan, your whole life really is spent worrying that the one you like is going to leave and the next one's going to ruin it. And that's what you do. You worry all the time.
Well,
and then you get to love that doctor, and then you worry when the next doctor comes. Oh no, they're not going to be the same as the last doctor, and it's that cycle basically.
Well, Neil Gaiman talked about that, right? Like it's he said that, oh my gosh, oh, this is horrible. This is the worst person ever. I can't believe that's who they picked. And then you go to, oh, well, maybe they're okay, to, oh my goodness, how could I have been so foolish? This is the perfect doctor. And then you go through that cycle again with each time.
I had that with Capaldi. It took me probably Mummy on the Orient Express to really like him.
Yeah.
And I often say that the one where Clara slapped him, I was so glad I wanted to slap him myself. Yeah. And yet David Tennant straight away, and Matt Smith's first episode, I was hooked.
Yeah, I remember watching Deep Breath in the cinema. We had it in the cinema here, and up until the point where he abandons Clara, and I was like, oh my god, what the hell is going on? The show is ruined. It's crazy. And then he comes back for her, and I had like tears in my eyes. I was like, yes, this is Doctor Who, baby. No one gets left behind.
Well, and I had a friend who could not stand Capaldi. Oh, he's the old man. He's the old man, the old man. And then she watched The Husbands of River Song. And she said, oh my goodness. She goes, I think only Capaldi, his maturity and his stage presence with Alex Kingston, and that end where you
wonderful.
She says, okay, the old man now has me. She goes, I get that. I appreciate that. We're going to wrap up our Doctor Who segment, but I got to hear favorite companions. And we'll start with
Mine's easy. Mine's always has been, always will be Sarah Jane Smith.
Yes.
She's still my favorite companion because she was my first companion. So yeah.
And so
I have a soft spot for Rose. She was the first companion I had. Rewatching the episodes, Rose, but also River Song. I love River Song.
Oh, me too.
I would have her in at least once per episode, once per season if I could.
Yes.
That'd be amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, in New Who, quite controversially, Martha. I loved Martha, but I didn't like the way that they wrote her as being in love. But I liked Clara, and I know a lot of people didn't like Clara, but I thought she was a perfect foil for Capaldi's Doctor, and I loved her.
In some ways, I like Clara better than Amy, and I know that's a controversial.
Ooh,
sure.
Yeah.
You know,
What about you?
I loved Amy and Roy together, but by far Martha, I will tell you, David Tennant and Martha, you know, my
Yeah.
favorite combination, because I felt like despite Martha's love of the doctor, you know, she was a medical doctor. She seemed to be independent. And, you know, from me watching Rose as my first companion to see Martha seemed to be a little more independent and more like self-sufficient, and she was bringing something to the table. So I really love that. I always think of, and absolutely, anytime I watch a classic episode with Sarah Jane, I fall all in love with her again, and I realize why she is beloved. And I always think of, and to get us over to Bruce, right? The song Bobby Jean from Born in the USA, the lyric is, well, maybe you'll be out there on the road somewhere in some bus or train traveling along. In some motel room, there'll be a radio playing and you'll hear me sing this song. Well, if you do, you know I'm thinking of you and all the miles in between. And I'm just calling one more time, not to change your mind, but to say, I miss you, baby. Good luck, goodbye. And I always say, instead of Bobby Jean, you know, yeah. So I always think of that, you know, good luck, goodbye, Sarah Jean. And so, yeah, absolutely. Well, this is great. For those of you who were tuning in for the Doctor Who segment, this is it. We're now switching over. We're going to take our hats off Doctor Who and put on our music hats. So I always like to start at the beginning. So Nick, start with you. What kind of music did you listen to in your family growing up?
So I had to, these were good questions because it really made me sit down and think. Yeah. We listen to my dad's music because my mother doesn't like music. So we listened to big band, swing, Frank Sinatra, Bing, Louis, Ella, that sort of stuff. And also on the periphery was my sister 70s top 40 music. So I had that sort of a little bit of this, I don't know, 70s glam rock and yeah, a bit of Sherbet in the background.
Oh, nice.
and Captain and Janelle. And then my dad's music. So yeah, that was me. That's what I grew up with.
How about you, Adam?
Yeah, so I grew up, you know, in the late '80s, early '90s, and you know, my family, there was an easy listening station called 4KQ, so we would always have that on in the car, and it was basically back then it was 60s, 70s, 80s. Now these days in the 2000s, it's like all the way up to the early 2000s. You know, is considered easy listening now. So I that's how I got my love of things like the Beatles and David Bowie. My mum was obsessed with Elvis. There were always Elvis pictures up on the wall. She loved watching his movies. We would always get my mum something Elvis related for Christmas or birthdays, that sort of occasions. And my dad was big into Suzy Q. So like 70s rock.
Devilgate Drive.
Yeah, Devilgate Drive. And he, for some reason, is quite strange. He was into Rocky Horror Picture Show. So he had that soundtrack. It was quite strange. So I spent my childhood hating Rocky Horror Picture Show because my dad loved it. And then it wasn't until I got into high school and I met my friends and they were into Rocky Horror Picture Show. They were like, I allowed myself to go, actually, this is pretty good. And then I got into Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it was because my dad was into it, basically. And I was like, well, I don't think so. Probably the closest affinity I had to the music of my dad was he was into Queen. And you can't deny that Queen is an amazing band. So I just had to be like, okay, we both like Queen then, you know.
My sister took me to the drive-in to see Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, yeah?
I was still at boarding school, so probably somewhere between grade 10 and grade 11. And I remember we were driving home. She said, you didn't learn anything in that, did you? And I went, no.
You know,
a bit of an education.
I love Adam because I think all of us went through a spell where you kind of rebel against your parents' music.
Yeah.
And so, and then, you know, as you get past that, then you learn to re-embrace it. So that's good. So are there favorite musicians that you guys live with today? Like Adam, if I mentioned, like, what are your top 2 or 3 bands that you love to listen to that are consistent companions in your life?
Sure. I mean, it changes.
Current people or people that just have
Whichever
stayed with you?
ones, just whichever one
Yeah.
you choose. Dealer's choice.
Yeah. So I mean, David Bowie is the one that has, from the moment that I started liking David Bowie and realized that I like David Bowie, has always stayed within me. You know, I was devastated. I still remember the exact moment where I was when I found out that David Bowie had passed. And I was actually on a bus and had to stop myself from crying until I got home. It was quite emotional because, you know, it's just, I don't know, that music just speaks to me so much. And I find, especially around that period of high school and early uni, was a lot of UK artists. So the Beatles, David Bowie. You know, I went through the 90s Britpop era with Oasis and Blur and Pulp and all that sort of thing. Currently, yeah, it's quite interesting because currently my 3 top favorite bands that I listen to pretty much exclusively at the moment are all American, which is quite interesting because I've had dabbles with American bands and that sort of thing. But at the moment, the main one is a metalcore band called Dance Gavin Dance.
Okay.
And they have this beautiful, like, melodic. It's like heavy metal music, but also like orchestra music as well. It's like playing a guitar like a violin, basically. It's very intricate sounds and intricate chords and that sort of thing. The one vocalist is quite high pitched. The other one does like the dirty, gritty, screaming vocals. And I quite like the juxtaposition between the two of them. But other bands like Coheed and Cambria, I got into their new stuff. They're a prog rock band who do concept albums, so it's all set within this sci-fi world, which I'm super into. But those would be my 2 main bands at the moment. Nicchia?
Okay.
I'm so uncool.
No.
I've just discovered actually a Jacob Dylan, who I love his voice.
Yeah.
And he's doing some great duets with different singers on great 60s songs like Mamas and Papas or The Association, stuff like that. Doing a really good job, but I love his voice. But mine is, I'm less about, oh my God, this band is fabulous, or this, and it's more for me, it's the music and the lyric. And if they can catch me, you know, that's where I go. Like, I would never say I'm the world's biggest Bruce Springsteen fan, say, but if you play I'm on Fire, I'm there. He's got me. So, you know, I couldn't say I listen to Eagles all day or Queen all day or Slade all day or Sweet, but there are just certain songs along the way. And I would guess that, I mean, even some U2 stuff, but I would guess that I probably, Michael Bublé a bit more because it reminds me of my dad, and I love that music. And I still listen to, now more than ever, Bing, Louie, Ella Fitzgerald. I named my daughter after Ella Fitzgerald, so I had that affinity for it. But yeah, and of course, you know, I grew up with the 80s, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of shit in there. But I do love ska music still.
Yeah. Whereas I grew up, you know, in the tail end of the 80s, and to me, I don't know. I don't like a lot of stuff from the 80s. I like stuff from the 70s, 60s, you know, 90s, obviously, some 2000s. But for me, the 80s is like this weird period. I do like a bit of The Cure. The Cure is pretty good.
Yeah, well, I rediscovered ELO the other day.
Oh, ELO.
I forgot how much I loved ELO.
I love ELO, and I had a guy who does an ELO podcast on the show a year or so ago, and it was funny because I was telling him how much in '77 I bought Telephone Line, that cassette.
Oh, I love that song.
Yes,
yeah.
and I was telling him how much I love Rockaria, and he said, "Do you know it's pronounced rock aria?" And I said, "Get the F out of here." He said, "Yes." He said, "All my life I've called it Rockaria as well." And he said, and I started researching it, and it is rock aria. I said, well, that makes perfect sense because she's an opera singer and everything, but he never did. So, yeah, that's it. Well, you mentioned a little bit, I'm on Fire, which, by the way,
Oh,
I make a joke that I will at least half the time, Nick, if you walk into a pub and there's a singer-songwriter there with his guitar and he's got a tip jar, and if you throw, $3 or $4 in there or and say, can you play a Bruce Springsteen song, half the time it will be on fire.
Yeah, and look, I've heard other people's versions, but Bruce's voice is perfect for it.
Yeah, it is.
It just melts me. I love it.
Yeah. Hey, little girl, is your daddy home? Can be a little creepy now. But yes, we need that. So how about you, Adam? Any Springsteen thoughts? And there is no right answer.
It was interesting, when we organized this, I was trying to think of, what I knew about Bruce Springsteen. Obviously, being here in Australia, as far as I know, obviously I wasn't too aware of music, new music in the 80s. And as far as I know, that's when Bruce was probably the most prolific.
Yeah, about mid-80s, nearly everybody from uni went to the Born in the USA tour.
Sure.
And I was telling Adam, there's 5 of us who didn't go. We called it the Born in the USA tour because then when you discover his earlier stuff, I think it's better. But that's me. So yeah.
Sure. And so I didn't know a lot of. I know the hits. I know Born in the USA. It's just quite interesting because I listened to the greatest hits and I heard Hungry Heart. And honestly, if you had played me that song and asked who sings this, I would have said, oh, that's a Billy Joel song. It's quite interesting how many songs Bruce Springsteen has done that I would tell you without looking it up have been done by other people. And I kind of associated Bruce Springsteen with like big heavy guitars and rock music and listening to some of his stuff. It's like, oh, there's a lot of piano in there as well.
Yeah, well, I remember discovering that Born to Run and The River with Bruce Springsteen and going, I've always liked those songs. So
yes,
I enjoyed finding his earlier stuff. I didn't like the 80s stuff. I just didn't, for some reason.
And the other thing is that I know is that Courtney Cox was in one of the videos for Bruce Springsteen.
Yes.
Obviously, I was big into Friends because that was
Dancing in the Dark.
Okay.
Yes.
Dancing in the Dark. Then,
yeah. So when he toured Australia in 2014, one of the things he did was he did a different cover of an Australian band's song on each city. And like,
I'm trying to remember because I remember reading about it and they said he did an amazing job, but I can't remember.
Yeah, so Just Like the Fire did, Friday on My Mind, and then he did a great version of Staying Alive. And then a couple weeks later, Barry Gibb was doing a live show and he did I'm on Fire, as a tribute. Like he said, I loved hearing Bruce doing Staying Alive, so we're going to try to do something to do him. So yeah, he
it's interesting just mentioning the Bee Gees. I'm from a place called Redcliffe here in Queensland, and that's where the Bee Gees kind of grew up. So in Redcliffe, there is like this, it's called the Bee Gees Way, basically. And, business hours, they play Bee Gees music. There's like all these, plaques up and everything. There's like a bronze statue of when they were kids. And so that's kind of, when you grow up in Redcliffe, that's what you're told is like, the Bee Gees came from here. And obviously then they went to the UK and made it big, but they started in Redcliffe and
so can I tell you a funny story? I was talking to a gentleman who's older than me who grew up in Redcliffe and went to school with the Bee Gees. And Barry was here to open up some parts of BG Way. And he said to me, he said, I went to school with the Bee Gees. And I said, oh, wow, what were they like? He said, we hated them. We used to throw rocks at them. I said, well, he's at Redcliffe Way. If you want to get a bag of rocks and head up there. But he said he wouldn't. But so it's amazing, isn't it, that the poor kids were bullied. They're richer than any of the bloody kids who bullied.
They are.
But, teenagers are terrible,
shitty.
I remember being a teenager myself and just starting uni in early 20s, and I would punch myself in the face so hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just wouldn't hang out with myself.
Yeah, he did Highway to Hell. He did he Don't Change from NX. He did Spill the Wine from Eric Burden. Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. He did Royals by, from Lord. And then Friday on My Mind, Easy Beats, and Drinking Wine from Stick McGee. So,
I'd love to hear his Friday on My Mind.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you Google it, you can tell. And then there is, So
even though I should say, Lord is actually in New Zealand, but anyway, that's probably
it was when he was in New Zealand. Absolutely was.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that makes.
I just wanted to.
No, that's a good point. That's that's like saying when he was in Texas and New Orleans, and I would go, no, New Orleans is Louisiana. Absolutely, fair enough.
Although we do like to claim Crowded House as our own.
We claim Crowded House, we claim Russell Crowe. They're all from New Zealand.
So we do it ourselves when they're famous enough. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What are other bands that you guys kind of love and enjoy hearing? Is there any, it sounds like both of you have a lot of, are you guys Gang of Youths fans?
I don't know them.
I've heard of them.
Okay.
There's a youth station here called Triple J. I listen to that mainly in the car, but usually I've got my playlists on, and I listen to one of 3 bands. So there's Coheed, there's Dance Gavin Dance. There's another band called Ice Nine Kills that I just got into. And they write songs based on horror movies, which is quite interesting.
Oh, that does sound interesting.
Yeah, I'm not really into horror movies, but I really like their music, and they've got a mix of clean vocals and dirty vocals, and quite melodic guitar sounds as well. So. But they just did a song about American Psycho, which I thought was really great. I love that movie. I love that book. So the album they did before their last one, where they did horror movies, was different books. So they did Dracula. They did Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
Ooh.
Sorry,
Frankenstein?
No, they didn't do Frankenstein. No,
they don't like women. That's why they didn't do it.
Sure. They did the Diary of Anne Frank. So
the reason I asked about Gang of Youths is I had a guy on the show that used to be a huge U2 fan, and he and U2 broke up. He jokes about it. Just for some reason, he kind of stopped liking their music, and then he discovered Gang of Youth and just loved the band. And when they toured the US, they did similar. They did a cover song on every city they visited from that city. So I always
think that's a nice way to fit into where you are, I think.
Yeah,
I know that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, you go.
No, I was just going to say, go ahead, Nick.
No, I'm stopping.
The only story I was going to tell is a couple of tours ago, a buddy and I went up to Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, kind of all that area. And Bruce started the show doing the song Kansas City, right? I'm in Kansas City, here I come. And the crowd went wild. And my buddy and I were asking, you would think they might roll their eyes and said, I don't want to hear this again. But I guess though, if someone opened up and were singing Yellow Rose of Texas, I would be like, yay, way to go. So, pretty funny. That's great.
I think we're all parochial, aren't we? When it comes to our own little turf, we want everyone to love where we are.
It's interesting because, I don't think there's many songs about Brisbane where we're based and, where bands come through.
There's a few I've written, but you won't.
Sure. They're terrible.
They're good too.
They just repeat the word Brisbane over and over again.
Well, what rhymes with it?
We're just happy if the artist can say Brisbane, because if you look at how it's written down, it looks like Brisbane because it's B-A-N-E, Bane, but it's Brisbane as in
B-E-N.
B-I-N. I say it's like the bin, the rubbish bin.
I find that with I was watching this cartoon with the kids once, and the guys on the thing is going, we're in Melbourne,
Yeah.
Canberra, and I'm going, well, that's why they won't call in. You're not saying the names properly.
I love
But
that.
it's just quirks of where you live.
Yeah.
Exactly. Any shows from the road, any concert stories you want to share, like where you've gone and seen people perform live, any events or things that that you think would be interesting for the audience?
I was really lucky when I was at uni, we would get every Aussie band through. So I got to see Oz Crawl, I got to see Cold Chisel, I got to see the Angels, the Church, I'm trying to think who else there was going through. And that was fabulous because they were the Hoodoo Gurus, they were fabulous. But what I do remember is Oz Crawl came out, or Australian Crawl, and I don't know, James Rain must have been 15 minutes into mumbling through one of his songs because you can never understand him. And somebody threw a full can of beer at him, nearly hit him in the head.
Oh, no.
Can I swear? I'll beep it.
Yeah. Okay.
He just stood there and he went, I hate you effing uni students, and they all left. We saw 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And U2. I went and saw the Joshua Tree.
Yeah.
When they were doing that concert. I was so excited. And behind me sat 3 girls who screamed the entire concert and just annoyed me. So, look, one of my most fun ones would have to be the BBC Doctor Who proms.
Oh, yes.
Because somebody went, look behind you, and I turned around and there's a Cyberman, and someone goes, there's a Cyberman behind you, and I thought, I'll never hear that again in my life.
Yes.
And Buble, because for $99 I got a full big band, and nothing gets me going like it.
Oh, I bet that was beautiful. Yeah.
It was fabulous. And of course, I used to go to the pubs to see the Cockroaches, who were my favourite band, who then became the Wiggles. So there you go.
And you still love them, don't you?
And I do still love hot potato.
I love that. How about you, Adam?
When I talking about Britpop and English music, one band that I loved for probably about a decade was Muse, the English band Muse. And every time they came to Australia, I'd go and see them. So I still remember, at the River Stage, which is like this big open air stage, basically, where you kind of have to stand or to try and get a good, but it's like a hilly sort of thing, so you can kind of, everyone can see. And one of the concerts that they did, Matt Bellamy had this piano with the lid, and the lid lit up as he played the notes. So it was this beautiful big show. Like, I haven't brought the latest album out, which is apparently a big technical show, for various reasons. It's interesting being in Brisbane because when big bands from around the world come out to Australia, there's kind of a 50-50 chance they'll come to Brisbane. Some do, some don't. But we have a better chance of places like Perth or Hobart, which have basically like a 25% chance of, they'll come to Sydney and Melbourne, and then they might come to a few different other places. So Brisbane, we're kind of a little bit lucky. And I saw David Bowie when he was out here for his last tour, and it was absolutely amazing. He had 3 different costume changes throughout the show. He sang Under Pressure with his guitarist, the female guitarist who sounded exactly like Freddie Mercury. It was just insane. It was so beautiful.
That sounds beautiful.
Oh, it was so good. The Australian band Something for Kate, who I also love, was their support act. So I just had like a wall-to-wall amazing, and
I would have to say, and I know you love Bowie, and I love Bowie too, but there is a song that Bowie needed to apologise for.
Which is that?
Dancing in the Street with Mick Jagger. They should both apologise for that shit.
Come on! After so
many
hits, you could give him, one like really cheesy pop song.
Oh, it's awful. Anyway,
I love the film clip because it's like, oh yeah, everyone was on a lot of drugs that day.
You would have had to have been.
It was for a good cause, for that.
That's true.
Yes, and it's a very fun.
Oh, I know. Oh, God, I hate it.
I love that. All right, so let's move. Who do you want to see that you haven't got to see perform live? are there bands that you would still love to see, that are out there touring? Like I regret I never went and saw Tom Petty, and now I can't. Same thing. I didn't see Prince. I should have. So are there people out there that you go, man, I should have done that, or I need to see them while they're still here?
I would have loved to have seen Elton John, but probably if I could go back in time, Elton John and the Rolling Stones. I would love to see the Stones. Maybe not as pensioners, but my God, I think it would have been a great, great concert. But now, look, Paul Simon or Simon and Garfunkel. My husband got to see Simon and Garfunkel and Bob Marley and Bob Dylan, and I'm so jealous. Like, he paid $5 to see AC/DC live in one of their first concerts in Toowoomba, little tiny town, and then they went touring, and a couple of girls from the school went missing, and then when AC/DC came back, the girls came back. I always remember that, but I wouldn't see AC/DC, but there's so many that have passed on that I think, I wish I'd seen them.
Yeah, look, I would have loved to have seen the Beatles. That would have been absolutely amazing. Like later Beatles around Sgt. Pepper is really, really good. But obviously, that was never going to happen because John Lennon was gone before I was even born. So that definitely was never going to happen. You're such a baby. Yes, probably some of the Australian bands that I got into when I was in high school, that I never got a chance to see. Bands like Jebediah and the Super Jesus and Custard. Oh, Custard is a Brisbane band. Yeah. And obviously that's never going to happen because one of their members has passed on.
I'm so glad I got to see In Excess.
Yeah.
Because I could have missed out on that. But
some of them, I know Jebediah and Custard are starting to do a couple of shows here and there, but I'm also at the point where it's like, do I really want to go and stand there and, be in the crowd? And, I've kind of got to the point where it's like, I'm happy just to listen to the music at home. So, but in my earlier days when I was more into like going out to live music, I'll go when it's like a big event, I would really like to see Coheed and Cambria because I've never seen them live. I got into them basically just before the pandemic hit. So they haven't been back to Australia yet. But, joining some of the Facebook groups about the band, it feels like it's a very communal family sort of vibe. So it would be good to go and see a big band like that.
Alice Cooper in his heyday.
Yeah.
I really would have loved to have seen him because in high school we weren't allowed to listen to Meatloaf or Bat Out of Hell or Alice Cooper. Yeah. So that's all we listened to.
so Nick, Adam, last year, September is the 6th anniversary. My first episode was in September 2015, a set listing Bruce. And so every September, for the past 2 or 3 years, I do a celebration. And last year I had Charles, who's my Doctor Who co-host, and we picked the 5 songs, the 5 concerts we would go back to if we had access to the TARDIS.
Ooh.
And that was a fun episode. And I said that going to Germany at the Caravan Club, right, to hear, yes. you could hear the Beatles in their rawness and before they're doing,
that would be great.
Yeah, another one I picked is the Johnny Cash did a show. And afterwards, Rick Rubin went backstage and they talked about signing him to his record label and how they would do the American recordings. And I said to see, like that. And so we picked, and like Elton John's at the Troubadour, right? Where they talk about that in the movie, like how cool would it have been to be there? So that was a fun, and so as you're talking about, to see Alice Cooper in his prime. So,
or Simon and Garfunkel live at
Central, that would have been nice. That would have been
fabulous.
amazing. Yeah,
Queen, to see Queen would be amazing. To see Freddie
or just
Mercury,
not Fat Elvis, not Fat Elvis,
But to see him,
I would love to see Fat Elvis. That would be an experience.
Yes, it would.
Everybody who's seen Fat Elvis is like, oh my god.
Yeah. Nick, I have one of my good friends, Gary, was on the podcast, and he was kind of similar to you. He was saying that at this point, he isn't that he'd gone to seen a lot of bands and he'd seen a lot of shows, and so he was kind of good, but it was more the experience. And so Kiss is coming to the Dallas area. And so there's about 5 of us, and I've never seen them live.
You've got to go. I've never
in my high school, like in high school, I was a big Kiss fan. Like Rock and Roll All Night. Boy, if you heard Rock and Roll All Night on the radio on a Friday or Saturday night while you were getting ready to go out, you knew it was going to be a good night. And so there's a bunch of us going, and Gary says, I'm more excited about going to dinner beforehand and all of us going and getting seats and going. He says, I'm going to enjoy the show, but it's the experience of seeing it with a bunch of buddies. And I think that's true. I think that's great.
And I think that's why the uni days were so good, because we were all there. It was just in the refectory, so there was you were all packed in, sitting on people's shoulders. It was so laid back and relaxed, and they were beautifully raw. I loved it.
It's so funny talking about Kiss, because when I was growing up, I heard,
I was made for loving you, baby.
Well, I always heard that Kiss is this like big band of the 70s, and like Nights in Satan's Service and all that sort of thing, like the Satanic Panic and all that sort of stuff. And you're like, wow, this must be crazy. And I remember actually hearing some of their songs and how music has evolved, and it's like, really? That's what people were worried about? And it's because music, because that metal version had become much harder when by the 90s. It was like easy listening when I heard the songs. But obviously when they were released, it was a big thing, like, oh no, they're trying to corrupt our kids.
I remember Dad telling me that was on the news. I was only a little kid. Alice Cooper was coming in trying to get into the country, and he's going, he's a Satanist. That's what he is. He's a Satanist.
Well, what I loved is anytime we're in high school where you got a cold, where all the sinuses are draining into your throat, you wanted to sound like Peter Criss. Chris, like, Beth, I hear you calling, and I can't come home right now. So we love that. All right, wrapping it up. This has been so much fun. Any final thoughts before I hit you guys up with the Mary question?
No, but what I do want to say is that music was such a big part of my life, because my dad liked to sing in the car, and I'd sing with him. My mother doesn't like music. I did the same thing with my kids. Yes. So my son, who's, late 20s, for a long time, he had 2 playlists. He had the up-to-date music, and then he had Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, a bit of Don McLean, a bit of Neil Diamond, because we sang all of that in the car on the way. Plus, my dad taught me this whole spate of like vaudeville ditties that I taught my kids as well. So although I say, like, I'm not up to date with music now. I saw Cardi B whack because you people told me to, and I'm still getting over it. But I'm still discovering music that's old that I have never heard. I just found the association. I've never heard of them. So,
what's funny is Chris used to call them the Beach Bags. Because I love the Beach Boys. Pet Sounds, one of my favorite albums. And he loved that.
Me too.
There is a local band here in just north of Dallas from Denton, Texas, called Brave Combo, and they do rock and roll polkas. And Chris would love going to that. And he would, when he was 7 or 8, he'd go, Dad, it's always a good time to polka. And so, so if you are an Adam and Nick fan and you're listening to this, go Google Brave Combo, Denton, Texas, and you will enjoy. They do some fun songs.
That's great.
Yeah, this is
like
great.
like Weird Al. Weird Al does his polka versions of rock songs. He just did Hamilton. He took a few songs from the musical Hamilton and turned it into a polka.
God, I thought he was dead. Is he still going?
Yeah, no, he's still going, man. He just had his first #1 album.
Oh God, I think the last song of his I saw was Like a Surgeon.
Oh God, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
He's done real well since then.
It was Nirvana singing with marbles in his
Yeah,
hand.
exactly. Yes. Yes, Weird Al is still rocking the house. All right. So if you guys are listening to this and you are, because you're huge Nick and Adam fans, thank you so much. I end every episode with the Mary question. So let me give you a little background. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher from the Philadelphia area. He just recently retired, but he would every year, his seniors in the honors English class, he would spend 2 days breaking apart the song Thunder Road. And they would look at all the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery that Bruce used in Thunder Road. They would talk about the themes of the song. They would compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, and would go over this. And then at the end of the 2 days, he asked his class, and that was their assignment, does Mary get in the car? So, Adam, I'm going to start with you. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Yeah, I was listening to one of your previous episodes, and the person that you asked.
Were you cheating?
Yeah, I was cheating basically.
Yeah, I applaud that. Research. It's called research.
Yeah, it's exactly. And they were saying that, you know, if you look at the lyrics, then no, probably not, you know. But if you listen to the song and you get the emotion, and then obviously since I've listened to the song, you want Mary to get into that car. And Nicchia calls it cheating, but I have to agree with that. I think if you look at the lyrics with everything that goes on between Mary and you know, the singer, who obviously is Bruce, probably not. She probably doesn't get in the car. She probably, you know, lives her own life. But listening to the song, feeling those emotions, you get swept up in it, and you really you want it to work out. You want it to be a happy ending. I know there are songs where things don't always work out, but I don't know, just the rawness, and maybe it's Bruce's songwriting, maybe it's Bruce's voice, the emotion that he puts into it. But yeah, I really want Mary to get in that car and for those two crazy kids to work it out, you know.
I love it. That's great.
Okay.
Nick, how about you?
First of all, I'm good. I love the lyrics. The lyrics are so, he's a poet.
Oh,
he
yeah,
really is.
totally.
And talking about concerts, I would like to see acoustic versions of Bruce Springsteen singing his songs would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love that. But no, she does not get in the car. And she shouldn't get in the bloody car either. Because really early in the song, he says, you're not that beautiful, but you're all right. I'd be going, piss off. I'm not getting in your car. So for me, as a girl, that lyric, that was it. He could have said anything he liked up that. I'm still fuming about being said I'm not a beauty.
But I get the feeling that even though he says that to Mary, he thinks about himself even worse than that. He's like, to me, and you know, it's part of other songs, but to me, there's bits where it's like, I don't know what you're doing with me, you know, like you're all right looking, but me, I'm horrible. I'm a terrible. Like he understands that he's kind of a bad person.
In my imagining, Mary's thinking the same thing. What am I doing with him? You know, alarm bells are going off. Yeah. And now he wants to take me, and he's probably just going to do me in the back seat, and I'm going to have a terrible time.
No, I like the idea that they're going to drive down that road, you know, holding hands.
To where?
I don't know. I mean, life is going to shit all over them, basically. Let's put that out there.
You may as well let life shit all over you with someone who at least thinks you're pretty.
Isn't it going to be easier to have someone else there, you know, to help you along, to build you up, you know?
You're better on your own.
All right. I do understand where you're coming from.
I'm holding out for a college graduate who comes home from the holidays.
So where they're going to go is they're going to go to the promised land. And I know it's late. We can make it if we run, right?
Yeah.
By the way, this is perfect because, and I usually am asked this after the fact, like, well, do you do like, you know, statistics? And I don't officially do this, but roughly about 60% of my guests say yes, and about 40% say no. So it is almost evenly split. My wife is exactly where you are, Nikki, where she's like, hell no. He said I was ugly. I don't want to get in this. No.
That's right. And I'm a bit dubious that the promised land is a bit of a hoo-ha.
Though there are plenty of people that say, exactly what you're saying, Adam, that he is saying that both of us we're flawed
Broken.
and broken,
Yeah.
and we can get there.
Yeah.
Now, I will send you guys, I will post this in our chat message. There is Bex Goss was a guest. She's a podcaster, and she sent me, basically, she said, no, if you get in the car, he's going to kill you. She said that, she goes, like, painting her as a vision, like a specter. This might be a fantasy, a memory of her. And then she's like, and like the line, don't run back inside, darling. You know what I'm here for. She goes, that sounds like a threat. So she wrote up this whole thing that basically says, man, if she gets the car, I think she's dead. And so and she goes, I hope you don't mind. I'm like, no, I love this. In fact, now then I want to do a series of episodes where I just give you Springsteen lyrics and you read into them and we have a discussion.
That's amazing. It's like the Nick Cave song, Wild Roses, that he did with Kylie Minogue. It was this big song. It's actually on like SingStar, a PS2 video game, as a song you can sing. And then if you sing it and you listen to the lyrics, it's like it's literally about a murderer who murders someone because they're too beautiful. But it sounds like this beautiful song. It was one of Nick Cave's most commercially successful songs because he was doing it with Kylie Minogue,
Yeah. Well, you go back to the great Bobby Darin, Mac the Knife, right? The shark bites, I mean, it's about this murderer. So,
and he's killing people all over the place.
Yes.
But it's such this poppy little.
But because of the poppy songs. Go ahead.
One of my favorite things to tell people about the Beatles is, Maxwell Silverhammer. You should listen to Maxwell Silverhammer because it is about a dude who takes a hammer and murders people. Yeah. But it's something that's popular, like bang, bang, Maxwell Silverhammer.
Absolutely.
That's like the song, My Funny Valentine.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he says, your figure's less than Greek, your mouth's a little weak, and when you open it to speak, you're not that smart. Like, do not sing this to me.
All right, guys.
But it's an interesting song, and I really liked reading that lyrics and then thinking, what should she do? But your friend thought he was going to kill her. I thought he was probably going to molest her.
Well, it reminds me, one of the first episodes we did on the podcast was A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
And so, and we had that same split down the middle. I thought it was this beautiful romantic love story. Matt Smith's doctor helps, Sardak or whatever his name was.
Meet the girl he loves.
Meet the girl that he loves. They fall in love and all that sort of thing. Meanwhile, Nicchia's like, no, this is creepy and weird. Like his father has captured this woman and like
he lets her out once a year.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had that split down the middle of like some people think, A Christmas Carol is one of the best Doctor Who episodes, one of the best Christmas specials, and then other people look at it again and go, oh, actually, this is really creepy.
Yes. Oh, very fair. Very fair. All right. If someone wants to reach you, first tell us how they can find the podcast. And are you guys on any social media?
Yes. If you want to capture us anywhere, we're D4WH. D, the number 4WH, stands for Doctor Who, What, When, Where, How. But D4WH on places like YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, Facebook, Twitter. We have an Instagram, but we're not teenagers, so we aren't on there very often. That's all the different places you can catch that. D4WH is part of the Nerd Infinite, so there's a website for that, and also we're on Facebook. I do improvised comedy here in Brisbane with a group called Big Fork Theatre. If you look for them on YouTube, you will find some shows that we did during lockdown last year. If you want to check out some of our comedy. We're also on Facebook, and Big Fork is about to open their own theatre here in Brisbane. So we're going to do a lot more performances. And I also perform with a musical improv group where basically we make up songs on the spot based on audience suggestions. And we're called Ho Hum Musical Improv on Facebook.
Way back in the day.
I'm not that excited.
No, I want to hear you, but I want to go back. And this is way before your time, but the Mac Davis, who just recently passed, did a variety show during the summer, and that's what he would do. He would go out in the audience with his guitar, and he would have people give him different phrases, and he would write a song right then and there. So yeah, I always love that.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
All right, Nick, how about yourself?
Well, I've got Nicchia Comedy, which is a Facebook page. And also under the Nerd Infinite, I do another podcast called Neighborhood Watching with Beck and Nick. And we are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram under NWWBAN podcast. And also we release weekly on Podbean and Spotify and iTunes and everybody else. Just a short little 20-minute one that I do with another female comedian.
And that's neighborhood spelt.
Neighborhood with an
English way.
O-U-R, the Australian way.
Very nice. Well, I am so happy both of you took time
Thank
out of your day. I
Thank you
appreciate
for having
it.
us. Yeah.
No, this is great. Listeners, please go to the links. I'll include them in the show notes. Continue, go get vaccinated, please. Let's remember to wear your mask, remember to social distance, remember to wash your hands, and let's all be good to each other, because really that's the only way we're going to get through this. For now, thank you.
Absolutely.
Stay safe, and we will talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlustingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlustingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlustingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts, as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Lusting Bruce shirts, as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.